Hey, it's Joey, welcome back to the channel. Let's get EDH wrecked. The new Secrets of Strixhaven set is on the horizon, and I, like many players, am extremely excited to return to this plane for another semester. Like the new Lorehold Dragon, giving Miracle to your spells? Ooh. Witherbloom, both having and giving affinity for creatures? Just whoa. Quandrix, giving Cascade. Silverquill, copying your spells. Prismari, giving your stuff Storm? Holy crap, right? And look at all those former uncommons that are now back for their senior year, and back with a vengeance. From Zimone to Zimone, Old Dina to New Dina, Killian Mach 1 to Killian Mach 2. These cards are crazy! But did anyone else notice anything? Does something in these previews feel kind of different? Whenever we revisit a plane, I like to look back at its previous set to get a feel for what was done in the past and get a sense of what to expect in the future. Around February, Ezra Sassaman put out a fantastic article on EDH Rec called Revisiting the Top 10 Commanders from Strixhaven. I read through the article and I was shocked, not by the commanders that occupy the top 10, but rather by the amount of decks to their name. Not a single commander from the original Strixhaven set is above 10,000 decks. That's Forgotten Pop Quiz from week 1 of the semester low. And frankly, that's kind of wild because, does anyone else remember the hype around Osgir the Reconstructor? He was top of the class for ages. Like, so many articles and think pieces and podcasts came out about this new direction for red and white. The red-white color combination finally got a whole precon that was led by a good value engine piece and wasn't just doing more Boros combat stuff. And yet now, when you look at all of the Boros legends out there, Osgir is in 15th place among them. Or what about Varen? Varen was practically valedictorian of Strixhaven. Doubling up all of the Magecraft triggers for just 3 mana in the command zone was crazy powerful, and it leapt right up to the top of the Izzet heap, but now when you look at all of the red-blue legends, Varen's in 5th place. We've actually seen this data in a previous show, which I'll of course link for you here. Both of the star pupils of Strixhaven, Osgir and Varen, fell into a category of commanders that had strong starts, but that faded out very quickly. They weren't just a blip, but they had no long-term staying power. As we can see, this isn't a uniquely Strixhaven problem. Adventures of the Forgotten Realms, for instance, had Prosper Tomebound, who was the king of Rakdos for a good while. You couldn't throw a stone without hitting someone's Prosper deck. But he too faded fast. He did not, in fact, live long and prosper. And we can see this even on various Commanders EDH Rec pages too, actually, here in the graphs section. Steady declines over time. Maybe they got a boost from a reprint or a secret layer or something like that, but they never quite got a full resurgence. The story for these professors is not one of them getting tenure because everyone's so excited to take their classes, but rather it's a story of them basically getting budged out of the faculty. The excitement is just not what it used to be. And while this is true of more than just Strixhaven, it is felt the most by commanders in Strixhaven, whose numbers I feel have plummeted the hardest after graduation. And it's not just the legends, it's the cards too, to a lesser extent, but still to some extent. The Command Zone even recently did an enormous episode about the best commander card from every set, and remarked that Strixhaven's offerings were surprisingly slim. Some of them remain pretty decent. Archmage Emeritus and Stormkiln Artist still see a whole lot of play. But a lot of my favorite cards from the original set are at barely 1% inclusion. Overall, the numbers from a set like Strixhaven don't seem to showcase the same type of staying power as, say, the set that came right before it, Kaldheim. While Strixhaven has a lot of cards struggling to even get to 3% inclusion, Kaldheim has a ton of cards that remained at least at 5% or more. And it has 5 legends with over 10,000 decks to their name. That's quite a difference. But it's not just that set. Zendikar Rising, as another example, also came out around that time, and it has commanders like Omnath still staying strong above that 10,000 deck threshold, and Scoot Swarms or Feed the Swarms and MDFCs keeping a lot of its data high too. Modern Horizons 2 also came out at that time, and it has 2 legends with over 10,000 decks and 12 cards at 5% or higher. Now, fair cop, there are some legitimate pushbacks in all of my analysis here. For one thing, percentages are not the end-all be-all. In fact, since Strixhaven is a multicolored set, 2 color cards have fewer total homes that they could go into, and that actually helps some of the percentages of cards here, even though a lot of those cards still have low total play rates. Some folks may end up weighing the importance of those figures a little bit differently than I currently do. Also, you may have noticed as part of my analysis here that I've not yet mentioned the Snarl lands from Strixhaven, which have somewhat decent play rates still, and that is because I hate these lands. I think they're awful. I think I would rather have a basic in my hand every single time, even in budget decks, even in 2-color decks, even in 2-color budget decks. Transparently, these have higher rates, not because they're actually good lands, but because Wizards keeps printing them in precons instead of giving us good dual lands. Although a few recent precons have been upping their game lately, which I do appreciate. Anyway, call this a bias, call this a hot take, call this a challenge to stats. I think all of the Snarl lands from original Strixhaven are very bad and should all see less play than they currently do, and that they are truly the one bad thing from from the original Strixhaven set that I don't think this set should be remembered for. But even including them, I still think that neighboring sets, like Kaldheim, still come across as more sustaining and impressive in long-term data, despite sets like that not having the same loving and glowing reputation that Strixhaven does. So I still come away feeling that disconnect between fond memory and actual rates of play for Strixhaven cards. Maybe I'm comparing apples to oranges here, as some of this does have to do with, lack of reprints affecting prices and therefore availability. Some of it has to do with Strixhaven being a multicolor set, so a lot of the cards have fewer total homes that they could even go into. I'm just saying there's a weird trend in the data, that Strixhaven is remembered very fondly by the player base, extremely fondly, and yet the data kind of indicates that it really peaked during the school year and it's fallen off completely afterwards. Why are we all not playing the cards from the original Strixhaven quite as much, despite how much we all say that we all like it? If we like a card design but it never actually gets played, oof, right? So what is causing that disconnect between liking a card and actually playing a card? How did this set simultaneously age so well and yet also age so badly? And will the new Strixhaven suffer the same fate? And if not, why? Why does the new Strixhaven feel so different? Well, before we can fully tackle that, I've got a couple of quick shoutouts to do for this channel's sponsors. First, Patreon. A great big shout out to Isaac Gaskins for supporting the channel at patreon.com/EDHRECast. Isaac, I hope every time you keep an exotic orchard in your opening hand, your opponents all play exactly the colors that you need for it to tap for any color you want. If you out there would like a chance at a shout out too, or to join the Discord, or would like to see the whole Challenge the Stats spreadsheet across all of the episodes of this channel, check out the Patreon for cool perks, and even if you want to support the show in free ways, consider hitting the YouTube buttons while you're at it. We've always got cool stuff to show you. This show is sponsored by Dragon Shield, makers of the best card sleeves you'll ever find, with officially licensed magic art from beautiful fetchlands to popular commanders. They also have a great scanner app if you'd like to track your collection, and it is wicked snappy fast. If you visit Dragon Shield, use code EDHREC, all lowercase, for a discount, and consider checking out their custom sleeves while you're at it. There's custom EDHREC sleeves, but also you can make your own. One of my buddies has been doing this for all of his decks, and it's honestly really sick to see during a game. Anyway, that's code EDHREC for a discount, and thank you to Dragon Shield for sponsoring the channel. Okay, let's get back to it. So, all of that was the context that we found ourselves in for this new return to the plane of Strixhaven, where once we had Osgir pioneering new red-white options, now we have Lorehold miracling every spell. Where previously Tanazir Quandrix did cute stuff with +1 counters, now Quandrix is full-on cascading. Where once there was a Willow Dusk precon pumping things up if you gained life, now the new Dina is pumping up and gaining life. I'm obviously still so excited about Strixhaven. These cards look awesome. I've just had this ambient sense that something feels different during this preview season compared to last time, and I actually asked patrons in the exclusive channel Discord if they felt anything different about the new set too. I didn't say what precisely was on my mind, but I just wanted to know if they sensed something different too, or if maybe it was just me. But it turns out it wasn't just me. A couple folks noted humorously that if last time felt like middle or high school, this time really feels like college, but a couple also pointed out that yeah, the new Secrets of Strixhaven set feels juiced. While cards from the first set were perhaps more wordy, the cards from this set feel more powerful, and the complexity of them comes not from learning what it is that they do, but in how to apply them in game. I love these observations. This is really well said. Patrons of this channel are fantastic. What else is new? But yeah, this really captures exactly what I was feeling. To get to the bottom of these weird abstract feelings and to try and concretize them, I'd like to propose a little case study here. Let's use the original Strixhaven set to see what we can learn about what works for popularity and what doesn't work for long-term sustainability, and see how that might inform the new commanders that we have from Secrets of Strixhaven coming up. The two most popular commanders from the original Strixhaven set that have held up the most over time are Veyran, Voice of Duality, and Dina, Soul Steeper. Both of these commanders have two things in common. One, they're pretty cheap, and two, they're pretty strong. Veyran doubles triggers from any permanent that cares about casting or copying an instant or sorcery. Double gutter snipe, but also double prowess. Veyran can easily one-shot an opponent if you have half a mind to do it. And Dina is a known part of life gain combo possibilities with Exquisite Blood, but even without that, the number of Essence Warden and small life gain triggers here and there that you're capable of could make very quick work of the rest of the table. It feels really clear that the commanders that are sticking around the most are the ones that are packing some heat. Compare this to the original star athlete of the set, the commander that we mentioned earlier, Osgir the Reconstructor. When this precon came out, it was a breath of fresh air. Like we had just gotten Feather, but Feather wasn't a whole precon, and this was a whole precon. Something that wasn't just combat focused, but that was actually just a cool, good value engine in the zone. And after the disaster that was the Calamity deck from 2015, which yes, I still blame Azuri for, when they started designing those decks from the ground up, red and white should have gotten the tiny creature experience trigger, not Simic. Tiny creatures is a Boros thing. Anyways, after that Kalemne deck kind of flopped, and then many other subsequent Boros legends were nothing but combat and equipment focused for years on end, Commander 2021 finally arrived with something that was very fresh and new. The possibilities felt endless. Osgir was a sacrifice outlet that also copies artifacts right from the graveyard. That could be simple value with like Ichor Wellspring or Solemn Simulacrum, or even artifact lands, but when you're ready to get spicier, it could also start doubling up things like Wormcoil Engine, and then you can manipulate those tokens by like populating them too. It was so freaking exciting to see. But 5 years after its release, Osgir is now at like 5,000-ish decks, rank 15 amongst all Boros legends. Why is this the case? Is it a friction issue? Is it a power issue? Osgir isn't weak. The ceiling on that card is super high. It can generate some absurd value. It can grind out a game like no one's business. And artifacts are known to contain combos if that's the type of playstyle that appeals to you. So it's got some explosiveness there too. But here's the thing. Here's my theory at least. Osgir was pioneering into a new space for red and white. Yes, that helps with an initial surge, for sure. But that also means that come the next set, when the draft archetype for red and white is Boros combat again or Boros equipment again, well, then the artifact and graveyard-based red-white deck from that past set just is going to get fewer pieces to help support it and give it a little bit more extra oomph. Repeat that situation enough times over the next several sets, and we start to see where the problem is, yeah? It might get some new artifacts from each set to look at and to potentially play with, for sure, but artifacts can go everywhere since they're colorless, so that applies to every deck, not something unique to Osgir. It's not like a dragon deck getting new dragons. It's not even like a Spellslinger deck getting new spells. This is one of the dangers that I highlighted in my 7 levels of Commander video. Sometimes institutional backing can help a commander to succeed, having all of that support helps them to get off of the ground in the first place, only to discover that that support is a little bit predetermined. It's the very thing that also caps how far that commander can grow. But other times, having no institutional support at all will help a commander to stand out, but then it can feel a little bit like a plant that grows too fast, and the stem and the root system isn't strong enough to hold that commander up anymore. Since I mentioned that video, just as a very quick aside here, thank you to some comments like these for giving me the opportunity to clarify that I don't use AI or ChatGPT to write scripts like that video or like this one. I don't use ChatGPT, I use my fucking English degree. Getting told that your passion sounds bot generated is gutting. And yeah, anyway, I know that that is thoroughly off topic, but it does give me a chance to shout out Levi Perry, a co-writer who helps me out with scripts on these videos sometimes. Thank you so much, Levi. I'll have his stuff linked in the description below. And also, just given the times of everything, clarity of stance feels very important. I know that I appreciate it from the folks that I watch, so no, I'm not going to be using the machine that thinks blueberries has 6 B's in it or whatever. You will not be finding AI generated stuff on this channel. If you do think that my prose or my delivery is too wooden or too flowery or too obnoxious, fair enough, but it is just going to be me. Pay $40,000 to get a creative writing degree just so you can get accused of phoning it in online because some iPad baby's never seen a metaphor before. Christ. Anyway, thank you, Levi. Back to the matter at hand, this is a thing that I think sets some of the commanders from Strixhaven apart from some of the commanders that dominate the top spots in the entire format. That is in fact consistently a feature of the commanders that dominate the top spots. While a commander like Osgir might infrequently get some new toys to play with, you can reliably assume that the Dragon will get new dragons dotted throughout the year. Most sets will contain at least one angel for Giada. Atraxa will almost always find something that she could proliferate. This is a hugely important point about sustainability of popularity. As much as it pains me to say it, how many games can we really play with the same deck where nothing changed in that deck before we start feeling like we want to reach for something else on Commander Night? Getting new cards means that those players are more likely to update their decks more often, which means that those decks will stay refreshed in the EDHREC database, so that is definitely a factor at play with these numbers, for sure. But getting new cards also just is a factor in your own excitement to play the deck too. My Barakos deck, for instance, cares about 4 different creature types, so every preview season has me on alert. Every preview season has a reason for me to perk up and look to see if there happen to be any new toys for that deck. By contrast, my Rooms deck isn't getting any new rooms to play with and probably won't for a good long while. And yeah, it is important to recognize that that probably will have some effect on how frequently I end up playing it. And not only that, but also comparing those top commanders to Strixhaven, a lot of those top dominating commanders also care about specific creature types, goblins or vampires, things like that. And a deck that focuses so hard on just one creature type often means that it's a deck that is hard to justify taking apart. Where else will all of those vampires and goblins go, after all? Using Osgir again as our case study here, Osgir is niche in terms of Boros offerings, but he's not so niche to feel like a deck that is hard to justify taking apart. A lot of the good value artifacts that he would want to use are also the kinds of value artifacts that you could use in other decks if you wanted to take it apart. I think this wound up being one of the larger knocks against Strixhaven's potential to have good longevity in the data, actually. By and large, the original set actually avoided most of the most popular creature types, giving it subtly fewer hooks into the mainstream of Commander. I've used Osgir as a prime example here, but it's not just Lorehold artifact graveyard stuff. Witherbloom Lifegain and Silverquill Politics were also very unique spaces from the original Strixhaven set, relative to those color combinations' usual fare. And again, this is wonderful. I love that about Strixhaven, and even if it did affect things in terms of the data, I honestly think that this experimentation is one of the reasons why we all love this plane so much. People really resonated with the schools of Strixhaven and felt a sense of identity and community with them. Experimenting with what these color pairs were capable of really helped to push card design to new levels. Silverquill does not feel like Orzhov. The decision to expand beyond traditional color pair identities truly enhanced this set, enhanced the feeling that allowed these color pairs to feel so unique. But that is also why a commander like Brina could never really take off. I mean, she's incredible. I love Brina's design so much, but this is just one of the realities that limited her potential, and that limited the potential for 3 of the 5 schools here. Their uniqueness is also kind of the thing that started to hamstring them. I said 3 of the 5 schools, and that's because Quandrix and Prismari were a little bit more typical in terms of what those color pairings would usually expect to see. They just wound up with different types of obstacles to their potential popularity. You know, they got tokens, +1 counters, Spellslinger. That's more familiar territory for those cards to be able to hook into the mainstream. But again, even though they did that, we saw that even Veyron could not last as a super popular commander for a long enough time. The mainstream is also very fast-paced, and I think that Veyron honestly just got absorbed into the 99 more often than it felt necessary for it to lead a deck. Osgir had less support, it's true, but it also had less competition, whereas Veyron now has to stand against, Vivi. We also, again, run into the issue of power. I think it's fair to point out that Osgir asks a smidgen more for you than Dina or Veyron do. Osgir needs you to set the stage first, in some ways. You don't just jam Osgir into play and immediately start to pull ahead. You need to sequence some things correctly to get the value that he's after. Compare that to the many commanders that dominate the format. Many of them generate value immediately upon entering the battlefield. They draw cards, make mana, or replace themselves instantly. Osgir has a high ceiling, for sure, but it also has a lower floor, which means just a little bit more friction than some of those other top dogs. He can still help you out a lot. Like, he can still be the one who gets the artifacts into your graveyard in the first place for you to be able to then copy. I'm just saying that in a world where we have more options than ever, where we're Lucy with the chocolates on the conveyor belt, sometimes a little bit more friction is all that it takes for a commander to begin to fade or to start to fall by the wayside. And all of that, at last, brings me back to the new commanders from Secrets of Strixhaven. What is it about this preview season that made everything feel so different to me? Well, to put it simply, a lot more of these commanders feel like they're trying to be Veyrons more than they feel like they're trying to be Osgirs. For the most part, the Elder Dragons from the original Strixhaven set felt more parts flavorful than outright powerful. They could still pack a huge punch for sure. They were very capable. Beledros especially is very noteworthy. But like Shadrix or Tanazir felt very flavor forward to me. By contrast, the return of the Elder Dragons in the new Secrets of Strixhaven, well, these feel like they're aiming to be more parts outright powerful than flavorful. A potential miracle every turn, affinity for creatures, storm. This isn't broken stuff. I'm not saying it's crazy OP. This format has Jodas in it, I'm just saying that this is why this new Secrets of Strixhaven set is feeling a little different to me. These legends feel to me like they are determined to stick around longer this time, and the way that many of them seem to have chosen to do that is through an expression of power. That's ultimately the problem that we're always going to face when Wizards of the Coast sees the equation of power equals popular and designs cards accordingly. The commanders from the original Strixhaven set that had the most popularity, the most staying power, were Dina and Veyron, which I think we can all agree were probably the most powerful of that bunch. So that influenced what we got upon our return to that plane. At the end of the day, Magic has to be profitable to continue existing, and if players are building around popular commanders and the popular commanders are the powerful ones, then those are going to be the cards that get made. But that has to be balanced very carefully, because we cannot keep pushing power forever without hitting a breaking point. On their end, it makes sense. If they want cards to sell, then yeah, they got to print the ones that they think will be popular. And if what they are reading is that popular means powerful, then of course that's what they're going to aim at, right? If the previous Witherbloom deck didn't sell very well, and the stuff that is still the most popular is the stuff that's just powerful, what other line do we expect Wizards to draw here? But on our end, the way that this manifests to us just as players is, again, that age-old problem of relentless releases, that constant barrage that risks us burning out to try and keep up, where we're constantly looking forward rather than feeling comfortable sitting with what we have, where sometimes it feels like we're consuming more Magic than we're actually getting to play it. Something about this entire experience can feel like we're not getting the nutrients that we want. I promise I'm not a Secrets of Strixhaven hater. The set looks great. I'm so delighted to be back to this plane. The original Strixhaven precons, playing them against each other, that was some of the most fun I've ever had playing Magic, and I want that for this time around too. I just also want this set to stick around because I like it so much. I want it to be able to stand out. I don't want it to feel like it must also succumb to that pressure to impress. I don't want it to suffer the same fate that the original Strixhaven is apparently suffering right now. I don't want either of these sets to become something that we leave behind. I do personally feel like fewer of these designs are pioneering in the same way that we saw a lot of the other cards from the original Strixhaven doing, and that's absolutely fine. This is a return to a plane after all, so you have to work with what's there, right? But even given that, I don't want these new commanders now to go the way that Veyron did, where they gestured towards power but then got absorbed, to feel like they must either be bonkers broken or else they risk fading. I'd like us to be true to the lore hold and dig up these old gems so that they don't become forgotten, because they're worth keeping around. When I look back at everything we've talked about here, Strixhaven kind of becomes a perfect snapshot of Commander as a whole right now. It's a set that people genuinely love. It is flavorful, creative, it's full of ideas that feel like they should have a long shelf life. And yet, so many of those ideas slowly start to fade out of rotation because something newer, smoother, or easier comes along to take its place. That is really the thread running through all of this. It's not that the cards are bad or poorly designed or anything, it's just that attention, deck slots, and time are limited resources. We only get so many decks that we can actively maintain and pay attention to, only so many cards that we can actually test, only so many commanders that we can learn super deeply. Even when something is really cool, it still has to compete with everything else that's clamoring for our attention. Commander is not just about power levels and synergies, it's also about what we actually choose to keep in our lives, what we build, what we revisit, what we make space for. Commander is not just about what's strong and new, it's also about what we decide is worth bringing back for another semester. So then maybe the lesson is actually rather simple. If something resonates with you, it does not stick around automatically. It sticks around because you choose to keep it there. And that's part of the fun too. Before we go, let's do a challenge of stats. This one comes from Riceboat in the Patreon Discord, who mentions Charmed Pendant is a very interesting card for Grolnok and Glarb. Charmed Pendant is a 4-mana artifact that can tap to mill a card, and for each colored mana symbol in that milled card's mana cost, you add 1 mana of that color. So for instance, if you mill a card that costs 3 blue, blue, black, you'll add blue, blue, black to your mana pool. Riceboat points out that with Grolnok, who lets you play permanent cards that you mill, this can help you cast those cards for a reduced cost, which might make some of them free. And in Glarb decks, who lets you cast cards with mana value 4 or higher from the top of your library, and who can tap to Surveil too, you can set yourself up to cast a big spell at a reduced cost. Plus, you fill your graveyard? Nice bonus. It seems like you could get your 4 mana's worth out of this card and then some. However, Charmed Pendant is only showing up in 24 out of the 6,700 Grolnok decks out there, and only 21 of the 20,000-ish Glarb decks out there. In fact, Charmed Pendant's only showing up in 1,100 decks total. If you're messing around with top deck and graveyards or self-mill, this is kind of interesting. It's a card I'd never even heard of before. Thank you so much to Riceboat for shouting it out for Challenge of Stats. Thank you again to Dragonshield and Cardsphere for sponsoring the channel. Thank you to patrons at patreon.com/EDHRECast for making this such a wonderful experience every single week. Thank you to Levi Perry for your help with the script for this video, and thank you for watching. If you had a good time, I gotta warn you, all the other videos on the channel are really good too, so you should probably hit those YouTube buttons to make sure that you don't miss any of them. Hope you enjoyed yourself, but until next time, remember, EDHREC your deck before you wreck your deck.